Occupying Till He Comes at Southwest Prophecy Ministries.
Welcome, friends. This is Dane Rome, your announcer for today's Last Days Beacon program. Thanks for listening, and thank you for joining us. Just a reminder that these programs are supported by your gifts to this ministry. If you would like to contribute to this ongoing faith ministry, which deals with Bible prophecy and current events, simply go to our website to contribute. Our website address is www.swpm.us. You'll find a donate link on the homepage. The website address again is www.swpm.us. Thanks for your prayers and support for this faith ministry. Well, friends, you're in for a treat today and for the next 4 weeks as Dr. Schnitger hosts L.A. Marzulli, who has become a regular guest on our programs. L.A. Marzulli is one of the world's leading experts today on the subject of UFOs, extraterrestrials, alien abductions, and biblical giants known as Nephilim. His research has literally taken him around the globe and earned him guest spots on the History Channel, Coast to Coast Radio, and prophecy conferences around the world. Today he comes to discuss his latest film project entitled Fatima, Miracle of the Sun, or a Harbinger of Deception. It was 100 years ago on October 13, 1917, that 70,000 people gathered in a field outside the little town of what is now called Fatima, Portugal, in anticipation of seeing a vision from God. What they saw rocked their world and continues to reverberate today. Did they see an apparition of Mary, a solar anomaly, or something quite different and quite sinister? Was this a vision from God or a demonic deception? Marzulli and his team traveled to Fatima recently to interview experts on the miracle of Fatima and examine eyewitness accounts of that event. What he discovered will shock and surprise you. These findings are the subject of today's program. I'll give you more details at the end of today's program as to how you can obtain this brand new film. But now let's join Dr. Dave Schnitger as he talks with L.A. Marzulli about his brand new DVD entitled Fatima, Miracle of the Sun, or a Harbinger of Deception.
Well, it is a great joy and privilege to have L.A. Marzulli on the program today and throughout the month of October to discuss his latest DVD entitled Fatima, Miracle of the Sun, or Harbinger of Deception. I've had the privilege of interviewing L.A. several times in recent years, and I consider L.A. to be a true friend and a friend to this ministry. He is also one of the leading experts today on the subject of UFOs, ETs, alien abductions, and Nephilim. Yes, friends, this is not the product of Hollywood. This is real life in these last days. It's a verboten subject. L.A. and I were talking before the show about how you will not hear about these matters in your average evangelical church today. Mm-hmm. It's a verboten subject, and there are many people who are suffering in silence because of their experiences with aliens and alien abductions. And L.A. has devoted many years of his ministry to this kind of an unexpected subject. Well, L.A., welcome to our show today.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Well, it's wonderful to have you. And for those who may not be familiar with yourself or your ministry, just take a few minutes to tell us about yourself, your ministry. Give your web address and tell our listeners how you became interested in the subject of UFOs.
Well, it all started with a book by my mentor, my deceased mentor. He passed away, unfortunately, in 2013, Dr. I.D.E. Thomas. Mm-hmm. And the book was The Omega Conspiracy, and that book was a game changer for me, life-changing. And I remember reading it and then going back in the bibliography and his footnotes and reading the books that he was drawing from. And I contacted him and realized he lived maybe 45 minutes from me. So that began a fellowship with him sort of a mentoring process with him. And I received an honorary doctorate from Dr. Thomas, and that led to the writing of the Nephilim trilogy, which is published by Zondervan way back in 1999, coming up to the 20th year anniversary of that. From there, it led into a series of nonfiction works. I've done, I think it's 12 books now and 13, 14 DVDs, so full-length films. The Watchmen Chronicles, in their own words, UFOs are real. Watchmen Chronicles Fatima, that's my new series. These are standalone films. Very excited about them, and we'll be working on Fatima Part 2, which will be out sometime in November, hopefully.
Amazing. Well, we are featuring this DVD, Fatima, Miracle of the Sun, or Harbinger of Deception, and this is part of the Watchmen Chronicles series.
Correct.
And we just featured your last DVD just a few months ago. And so this is the latest in the Watchmen Chronicles series, and very intriguing subject. And this is a subject that, to my knowledge, and I'm not an expert, but I've been in Christian circles for about 50 years, but the subject of Fatima has not received much notice or analysis by evangelical Christians. Of course, it's received a ton of notice and attention over the last 100 years by the Roman Catholic Church. And I mean, this is a big deal within Catholicism. But to my knowledge, very little has been done in terms of evangelical analysis of what is known as the miracle of Fatima. So we're going to talk about that, and I've just made some questions. The first thing that comes to my mind, since you're not a Catholic, you're an evangelical, born-again believer in Jesus Christ, right. Probably are not a regular in confessionals or within the Mass. So why did you decide to go to Portugal, to the little town of Fatima, to investigate what seems to be a Marian apparition?
Well, first of all, and right up front in the film, we state, our voiceover guy, Bill Myers, states that we're not here to disparage anyone's belief system. In fact, the copy that I wrote for him to say was, millions of people millions of pilgrims attend or go to Fatima every year. Millions of Muslims encircle the Kaaba stone in Mecca. Millions of Hindus celebrate Guru Puja. Millions of Buddhists attend thousands of temples all throughout Asia. We're not here to disparage anyone's belief system. People can believe what they choose to believe, and that's fine with me. Now, saying that, I have a right to believe what I want to believe, and I have a right to state and explore my belief system, and also look at so-called supernatural occurrences and weigh in on them, hopefully in a very objective viewpoint. And I think we've done that. We were in the process of working on another film, and we've heard this often. The Lord will direct your steps, and commit your works unto the Lord, and He will direct your steps, and that's what we try to do. And I was in the bedroom getting ready for the day, and I had one word from the Holy Spirit: Fatima. And I had written about Fatima about 10 years ago in a book called Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural, which, by the way, Tom Horn and Chris Putman used that entire chapter in Exo Vaticana. And I was very proud that they did that, and very honored that they would do that. But nevertheless, they used that in Exo Vaticana, my research. And the Lord gave me one word, Fatima. And I just went, oh my gosh. And then the dominoes fell, and I realized, wow, this is the 100th anniversary of the events that happened in October 1917. It was 2017, October 13th, 100th anniversary. So I walked into where my wife was, and I said, honey, we're going to Portugal. And she went, what? I said, yeah. Told her the whole story, and funds came in. We were able to do it. We spent 2 weeks in Portugal. Went to many different areas, had some wonderful people come in on the record. And there's two versions of Fatima. There's the version that most people think they know, and then there's the version that we explored, which comes from the 1917 handwritten interrogation of the witnesses. Now, the further out you go, 23, 28, 32, 1940, it becomes completely confabulated, in my opinion. But when you go to the 1917 handwritten records from the eyewitness testimonies, that's what you've got to go to, in my opinion. That's because it's closest to the event. These are the witnesses who are coming on the record telling us exactly what they saw, what they've experienced, including the three seers, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta. And what most people don't realize, these are very, very young children. Lucia is 10, Francisco is 9, Jacinta is 7. They are illiterate. They can't read or write. It's 1917 Portugal, dirt roads. In fact, in the village of Cova de Ida, which is not called Fatima at that time, in the village of Cova de Ida, the Cove of Irene, there's no church there. You know, it's a hamlet. It's not really even a village. There is a parish priest, Father Fiera, who interrogates the children, and this guy's been sort of given a bad rap because he believed it was demonic right from the get-go. And what we discovered there, kind of rambling here, but what we discovered was that Portugal is steeped in a matriarchal society before the Christian era, before the Roman era. There was goddess worship in a matriarchal society. And there are, most people don't realize it, there are hundreds of apparition sites, so-called apparition sites, in and around Portugal. So Fatima is not unique in any way, shape, or form. It's just the one that gets a lot of attention because of the one event that happened on October 13th, 2017, called the so-called Miracle of the Sun, which, by the way, is a misnomer, in my opinion.
Well, 1917, we're, of course, going to be airing this program in October of 2017, the 100th anniversary, very appropriate time to come out with a fresh study and analysis of what happened 100 years ago. What, in your opinion, L.A., was the historical setting in Portugal in 1917 that may have contributed to the interest of the townspeople, the people, the peasants that came together, in what was perhaps perceived by these staunchly Catholic people as an apparition of Mary? Was there something about the setting of 1917 that gave people a hunger for some kind of a apparition or message from God?
Well, first of all, World War I was raging. And people were wondering when is the war going to end? And, when you look at the horrific trench warfare, just the slaughter, the cannon fodder of these so-called soldiers. I mean, it was just barbaric, absolutely barbaric. And at the same time, the Bolshevik Revolution is taking place in Russia. So it's a very complex, very unstable, very volatile climate in which these so-called apparitions take place. Also, at the same time in 1917, the Balfour Declaration is passed. So this gets into, it's a very complex situation, and it makes one wonder, what are we really looking at here? And that's why when we went back to Fatima, to Portugal, and interviewed these people that have spent, in some cases, decades exploring the events of Fatima, poring over the records, what we found was very enlightening and also very alarming. Well,
again, for those who perhaps are not familiar with the details of this event, tell us some of the events that led up to the miracle of Fatima that occurred on October 17, 2017, that perhaps contributed to the idea of 70,000 people who were not internet connected converging on this basically open field outside of this little town.
October 13th, 1917. Yeah. The first apparition was in May 13th, 1917. And this entity appeared to the three children, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta, and they went back and told their parents. And immediately, you're lying. What are you talking about? What did you see? Let me move away from that just for a second. What we discovered there were apparitions in 1915, and there's also a fourth witness, which remained undetected and uncovered until Fina de Armada, whose book, along with Joaquim Fernandez, served as sort of the anchor for all these interviews, because they really went in. Fina de Armada had access to the records that were kept in the sanctuary, and what was interesting is These records, no one else was allowed to see them. No one had looked at these records in decades. These were the handwritten records from 1917, which were kept in the sanctuary at Fatima. The sanctuary at Fatima is a multi-million-dollar complex, which can hold upwards of 1 million pilgrims at once. It's a huge open area, very much like the Vatican, and it's very much dialed in. We were there in July 13th and watched this 4-foot statue of Mary on a bed of roses being paraded around this huge open area with thousands of people waving handkerchiefs at it. And when we got there, the film originally was called Mary the Bible or A Harbinger of Deception. When I saw that, we took Mary off the table. And that's where we came up with the caveat: people have a right to believe what they want to believe. We're not attacking. If people think that it was Mary the Bible, that's their right to think that. We're not, we're not going to sit there and attack it and disparage anyone's belief system. End of story. We're not going to do that. It's not what the film's about. However, something happened during the progression of events from May 13th to October 13th, 1917, culminating in what is known as the, quote, miracle of the sun. And what happened in that field, which upwards of 70,000 people were gathered, remains controversial in my opinion. And again, going back to the 1917 records, you'll hear me stress this over and over and over again, because that's what we have to go to. Because what happens 10, 11, 20 years, 30 years later is a confabulation, in my opinion.
Right.
And that's the information. That's what we draw from. The facts.
The eyewitness accounts of people who actually were there.
Right.
They wrote in their own hand. What they saw.
Yes.
And that's, of course, when you're investigating, you want to get back to the eyewitnesses as much as possible, see what the collective data is, and try to draw reasonable conclusions from that. Well, next time we'll get into some of those. We are out of time for today. L.A., thanks for joining me for today's show as we introduce the subject of Fatima, Miracle of the Sun, or A Harbinger of Deception. We'll continue our discussion next week. And now our announcer, Dane Rome, will share how you may obtain a copy of this fascinating DVD.
Thank you, Dr. Schnitger. You may obtain a copy of the DVD Fatima, Miracle of the Sun, or A Harbinger of Deception for a gift of $19.95 plus shipping. To obtain your copy, simply go to the homepage of our website, www.swpm.us, to find the film. That website address again is www.swpm.us. Again, this film is available for your gift of $19.95 plus shipping. Please join us next week as we continue our discussion with L.A. Marzulli, brought to you by Southwest Prophecy Ministries. Until then, this is Dane Rome. Thanks for listening.